How did you deal with loss?
Faith. You know, I'm Irish, I'm Catholic. The church has been a big part of my life.
There are men who are defined by what they do, and then there are men who are defined by what they endure. Pierce Brosnan has spent a lifetime being both. The world knows him as the suave, silver-tongued spy who saved the world 4 times on screen. But behind that composed face, behind the tailored suit and the steady jaw, there is a man who has watched cancer move through his family like a thief, quiet, patient, and merciless. And now, as he stands at 71, the news coming out of his household is the kind that makes even the most guarded man stop and say, plainly and without a script, that life is fragile, that love is finite, and that some goodbyes come before you are ready. Pierce Stephen Brosnan was born on May 16, 1953, in the town of Drogheda, on the eastern coast of Ireland. His start was not glamorous. His father, Thomas Brosnan, a carpenter, vanished so early from the picture that Pierce has said he could not recall the man's face. His mother, May, a nurse by trade, did her best in an impossible situation, but in 1957 she made the painful decision to leave for London to find work. Pierce was 4 years old. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement stretched into 7 years. He was passed between grandparents, then an uncle, then an aunt. Each home was a new beginning that never quite took root. He grew up learning to be invisible in plain sight, quiet, observant, always the outsider in someone else's story. That changed in 1964, when he finally rejoined his mother in Scotland, where she had remarried. Her new husband, William Carmichael, was a gentle man who worked in a factory and made no effort to replace anyone. He simply showed up, steady, patient, and kind. One afternoon, William took a young Pierce to the cinema. The film was Goldfinger. Sean Connery filled the screen. For an 11-year-old boy who had spent his childhood being moved from place to place, James Bond was not just entertainment. Bond was the man Pierce wanted to become, controlled, unafraid, desired, respected. That afternoon planted something that would take years to bloom. By 16, Pierce had dropped out of school and enrolled at St. Martin's School of Art in London. He had no money and no particular plan, only a genuine love of painting and a determination to prove he belonged somewhere. He survived on toast and tea while his classmates came from comfortable homes. But fate has a way of redirecting the passionate. In 1971, while still studying, he stumbled across a theater workshop in South London and found himself asking a fire eater if he could try. That single impulsive moment rewrote everything. The group noticed something in him, a natural presence, a willingness to risk. He began to act. From 1973 to 1976, he trained rigorously at the Drama Centre London, a school notorious for its intensity. Over 60% of students did not finish the program. Pierce did. He went on to early stage work, then small film roles, a blink-and-miss-it appearance in The Mirror Cracked alongside Elizabeth Taylor, a supporting turn in The Long Good Friday that quietly impressed the right people. Then came 1982 and the role that changed the trajectory of his life, Remington Steele. He had auditioned for a minor part. He walked out with the lead. The show made him a household name in America and, crucially, caught the eye of Bond producer Albert Cubby Broccoli. But before any of that fame fully settled, Pierce had already fallen in love. In the late 1970s, he met Cassandra Harris, an Australian actress born Sandra Colleen Waite. The spark between them was immediate and undeniable. They married on December 27, 1980. She had 2 children from a previous marriage, Charlotte and Christopher, and Pierce adopted them both without hesitation. He had grown up without a father and was determined to be one with his whole heart. In 1983, Cassandra and Pierce had a son together, Sean. The family of 5 felt complete. Life, for once, felt warm. It was Cassandra who introduced Pierce to Bond. She had a small role in For Your Eyes only in 1981, and on that set, Broccoli first noticed her husband. She pushed Pierce to pursue the part. She believed in him before the world did. And for a time, it seemed as though everything was aligning. But in 1986, Cassandra began to feel ill. Tests came back devastating. Ovarian cancer. And not a contained case, it had spread. Pierce stood beside her through 8 surgeries and 18 months of chemotherapy. He watched the illness take her hair, her strength, her ease. And still she carried herself with a composure that stunned everyone around her. Cassandra Harris died on December 28, 1991. She was 43 years old. Christmas had just passed. Pierce and her son Christopher were at her side. She went quietly on her own terms, having asked not for machines or hospitals, but for dignity. Pierce was left to tell their 8-year-old son Sean that his mother was gone, and to raise 3 children. Sean, Christopher, now 19, and Charlotte, now 20, on his own. The grief was total. But Pierce kept moving. He threw himself into his career, and in 1994, after years of delays and near misses, he finally became James Bond in GoldenEye. The film was a resurrection, not just for the franchise, which had gone quiet for 6 years, but for Pierce himself. He did 90% of his own stunts. He poured something real into the character, a hard-won composure that came not from a director's note but from years of holding himself together in the face of loss. GoldenEye made $353 million worldwide and launched a Bond era that would span 4 films and nearly $1 billion in box office revenue. And then, just months before he officially became Bond, something else happened. On a beach in Cabo San Lucas in April 1994, Pierce met Keely Shea Smith, a journalist and environmental activist. She was not impressed by the fame. She was interested in the man. They talked until 2 in the morning. He brought her to meet his children within weeks. She moved in 6 months later. In 2001, they married at Ballintubber Abbey in Ireland, a church nearly 800 years old. He wept when she walked down the aisle. Together they built a life of remarkable steadiness. They had 2 sons, Dylan and Paris. They traveled, advocated. Pierce became a UNICEF ambassador, marched with Greenpeace, raised funds for cancer research, boycotted film premieres to protest nuclear weapons. He was not content to let his tragedies be merely personal. He wanted them to matter beyond his own walls. But in 2013, the cancer came back. Not to his wife this time. To his daughter Charlotte. Ovarian cancer, the same disease that had taken her grandmother, the same disease that had taken her mother Cassandra at 43. Charlotte was 41. She had been fighting for 3 years when the end came. She had been married just 2 weeks earlier, a ceremony she had planned herself in her final weeks so that her children, Isabella and Lucas, would carry with them a memory of their mother choosing joy. She died on June 28, 2013, surrounded by her children, her husband Alex, and her brothers. At a cancer fundraiser the following year, Pierce stood before a room and spoke without the usual shield of composure. He described holding Cassandra's hand as she died. He described holding Charlotte's hand. He said the words plainly, without deflection. This wretched, inherited disease had taken the 2 women he watched over most closely, and he would not stop fighting it. Now, the story has turned again. Keely Shea Smith, the woman who steadied him, who stayed beside him through Charlotte's death and the dark years that followed, who was mocked publicly for changes in her appearance and defended fiercely by Pierce, has received a diagnosis. The details have been kept private, as is their right. But Pierce has spoken in the way a man speaks when he is preparing for the hardest stretch of a long road. He has talked about faith, about prayer, about what it means to sit beside someone you love in a hospital and understand fully what that means, because you have done it before, and you know what that room feels like, and you know what the silence costs. He is 71 years old. He has played the toughest man in cinema. He has won and lost more than most people are asked to carry. He built something real with Keely, 32 years since they met on that beach, 23 years of marriage, 2 sons, a life made on the terms they chose. And now he is saying, quietly and without drama, that he is not leaving her side. That faith carries him. That love is not a feeling that retreats in the face of bad news. It is the decision you make every morning to stay. Pierce Brosnan has never been the man the script said he was. He was always something more complicated and more human. A boy who grew up passed between strangers, a husband who sat in hospital rooms and learned what grief really costs, a father who buried his daughter and still showed up the next day. The tuxedo and the one-liners were never the point. The point was always this: a man who kept choosing to remain, even when remaining required everything. Whatever comes next in the Brosnan household, it will be faced the same way everything else has been faced, with honesty, with Keely's particular kind of quiet courage, and with Pierce standing exactly where he has always stood when it counted, right beside the people he loves.